I am Janakraman from Aspire Systems, and I'll be your host for today's session. I'm sure the next 1 hour will be very interesting and informative to all of you. While there are several discussions around SaaS that is happening, we have chosen the most critical topic from a business perspective, which is the bottom line, profitability. As we all know, SaaS has redefined the way of doing software business, but the key question that has often been raised by many CEOs is, can I meet the same profitability that I am getting from my on-premise application? In today's session, we are happy to have Amy Wold, a SaaS enthusiast and an industry-leading speaker, and Alex Ginger from Active Operations Management, who will be sharing and providing us great insights about their SaaS experience. Before we move on, I'd like to quickly explain about who we are. We are Aspire Systems, a thought leader in outsourced product development. We are an ISO 9001-2000 certified company, and we have accomplished more than 1,050 plus product releases to date. And we have a customer base of more than 80 plus, with around 475 product tiers, our engineers. And we have several awards, including the Black Book of Outsourcing and Deloitte Technology Fast 500. So I'd also like to quickly give a few housekeeping instructions. All of your phones have been set to mute. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat window located in the presentation panel. And we did receive questions from the registrants prior to the session, which we will be taking up and answering during the Q&A session. We will continue to collect more questions as you enter, and we will try to address them as time permits. And in case if we are not able to address, we will get back to you via email. So I'd like to introduce Amy Wold, President of Wold Associates. Amy Wold is a SaaS expert and a computer industry analyst with over 30 years of experience in the IT industry. Her specialties include the SaaS, cloud computing, SOA, and she has helped several ISVs in commercialization of the new technologies. And she has been tracking the SaaS happenings since 90s, which is when the ASP market first appeared. And she has also authored the book of Succeeding at SaaS, Computing in the Cloud. Amy Wold, I'm going to give you the control and you can take it from there.
Thank you very much. Today, we're going to be speaking about a number of topics in the SaaS market. If I can just get this to go forward. I have an agenda which will summarize some of the things that we're going to be talking about. Let's see, can I get this to work? I don't seem to have the control, Janaki. It's not moving around for me. Oh, there it goes. Here we go. Let's see if that will work. I'm always a little nervous when we hand off controls over thousands of miles and see whether or not the computer is actually going to behave for us.
Right. So there could be a couple of delay, lag in terms of...
Yes, we have a lag interval built into this. I don't want to hit it 12 times and then have it go to the end of the presentation. Let me try one more time. So basically what I'd like to talk to you about today is I'd like to talk to you about some issues that have to do with what you have to consider in the differences between how SaaS works. Janaki, it is not working. I have hit it 3 times and it is not advancing. Do you want to take it back and just move it for me?
Sure.
Rather than keeping people waiting?
Sure. So I have taken the control back and I'm going to move to the next slide.
Yes, thank you. So let's just take it forward to the first slide, which is an agenda slide.
Sure.
And we're going to be talking about some of the differences between what you need to do when you move from the traditional software development market to the SaaS market. And I'm going to be talking about the differences in how costs change in development, running your operation, and in marketing, and how that all leads to the need for a different business model. And then I'm going to talk about the fact that SaaS can be a very profitable business. I want to make that very clear because you will hear loud noises from some of the traditional ISVs from time to time saying that you can't make any money at SaaS. What they're trying to do is tell you that, or really tell their customers that that traditional software is the way to go, and that what they're doing is the right thing. I assure you that what they're really trying to tell themselves is that they don't have to do anything to change. We know that that's not true, so let me tell you how you make money at this. Let's go to the next slide now. And we're going to be talking about when you move to SaaS. And really the reason why so many software developers are talking about moving to SaaS is it's the new software distribution paradigm. And if you talk about developing software and you're looking for investors, for example, you'll find that nearly all of the investment in new software development is an investment in SaaS. Almost no one is making an investment in traditional software today, and that's because people are pretty sure that much of the purchase of new software in the future is going to be in SaaS, and people want to put their money where that future buying power is going to be. Also, customers of every size are looking at SaaS. A number of surveys have been made in the last year or two, and they all lead to the following conclusion. About 70% of companies of every size are either already using some SaaS software or are looking at purchasing SaaS software within the next year. Now, that doesn't mean that they're taking out all their software and moving to SaaS. It means they're using some SaaS software for something. Now, it is true that there are some protected markets that probably won't move to SaaS right away or even perhaps ever. And they tend to be very small niche markets that don't have to worry about someone coming in and building a SaaS product to compete with them because the market is too small and too specialized, or entrenched mainframe applications for existing customers where it doesn't make sense for a SaaS vendor to come in and look at that. It's very large-scale software. The customers already belong to someone. Probably isn't worth the expense to try to take them away. Or there's just some applications that don't make sense, at least today, on SaaS. Maybe they require huge databases that it's hard to think of how you would use them in a SaaS environment, although already people are starting to look at how you would do that. Anything else, anything but these special kinds of applications is a potential candidate for SaaS, and now we can move on to the next slide. So we really have people looking at nearly any kind of application you can imagine, and I get emails and phone calls asking me to do briefings with SaaS vendors, probably about 20 or 30 a week. And believe me, they are for every kind of software that you can imagine, from enterprise ERP to travel expenses to project management to retail inventory to I can't even think of some of the things that I've been offered recently. Just unimaginable different stuff. So when we get to the next slide, we're going to be talking about the cost of development, I believe. Can we get there? Janaki, are we moving forward?
Yes, I have moved to the next slide.
Okay,
There's
great.
a second delay.
Just a lag for waiting. Okay. I'm thinking of vast oceans and huge bodies of air between me and this other slide.
Right.
When you think about how you do development for SaaS as opposed to how you do development in the traditional software market, one of the things that you need to be thinking about is that there's an initial investment, and that initial investment does represent a new cost. So first of all, you have to think about whether we went one too many forward. So you need to go back one. First of all, you have to think about whether this is a new application or whether you're taking an existing application and moving it to the SaaS platform. And whether when you do that movement, whether you're going to take that existing application and migrate it entirely or whether you're going to support both a traditional software application and a SaaS application at the same time, because those are two very different things. If you're going to build a whole new application and not worry about something that you already did and have to continue to support, you can look at it very differently. If you're going to need to continue to support an old application, you have to decide whether you're just going to lightly rewrite things and move them to SaaS, or whether you're going to build a whole new SaaS-style application and then support both applications, or then backtrack and use a traditional version of the SaaS-style application so that you're really only supporting one application on two platforms. And that's a decision that only you can make. Development for SaaS is actually just as efficient, but you need skilled staff who know how to do that kind of development. So if that's something new for you, then you're going to have to get those skills in your organization in order for you to do that. And sometimes that takes a little while to get up to speed. Sometimes Born for the web developers go the other way. They have a SaaS application, and they take that SaaS application and they package it up as an appliance so that they can take that application and offer it to a customer who doesn't feel comfortable using an application that's outside of their firewall, and they can use that application bundled up on that appliance inside their firewall, but it's still written as a SaaS-style application. We're seeing lots of that today. Don't assume that you can use an application written in the traditional style that was written for a use inside the firewall on the customer's own hardware application, slap it up on the web, and run it as a SaaS application and make money on it. That was what happened in the ASP round. That's what people tried to do, and they all lost their shirts trying to do that. SaaS applications have to be written to run on the web. So when you're talking about operational costs, now you're in a whole new world. When you think about how ISVs relate to their customers, they don't really have operational costs on behalf of their customers, because once you sell something to the customer, you now have sold the software to the customer, and the operational costs are the customer's. He's the one who's running the application. What happens next is everything is a revenue stream. Maintenance and support is a revenue stream. If you help the customer with implementation, it's a revenue stream. If you do customization, it's a revenue stream. But a SaaS ISV is entering into a kind of permanent relationship with their customer. So you're going to be running a platform, or I hope paying a partner to run a platform, on which your application is going to run so your customer can use it. And so you're going to have a permanent operational cost in order to offer the application to the customer. And that has to be built in to the price at which the application is being offered. Otherwise, you're not going to make any money. Maintenance and support is part of the subscription fee. The customer doesn't pay extra for maintenance and support. Now, I want to put a little footnote here, because it is entirely possible to offer different levels of maintenance and support and charge differently for those different levels. So you don't have to offer premium maintenance support to everyone and charge one level of subscription for that same level of maintenance and support. You can have a basic level of maintenance and support that's included in your price tag that everyone sees that you're using to entice people to look at your product. And then you can have other levels of support, think of them as gold and platinum if you want to, that you offer to customers who want more enhanced levels of support, which you offer at a higher subscription fee. That's very common, and people are perfectly happy to pay for it if they want it. You will also be providing upgrades as part of the subscription fee, and you will be providing them much more frequently than you do in the traditional software market. It is not at all unusual for SaaS providers to offer upgrades as frequently as several times a year. We can go to the next slide now. So operational costs are a whole new idea. The original ASPs, the beginnings of the SaaS market, lost their shirts by not understanding operational costs. Don't do that. Understand what it's going to cost you to actually run the application and build it into your cost model. You're also going to have marketing costs. That's another thing that the original ASPs didn't understand. You know, when you're a traditional ISV, you have to market your software, and You might use your own direct sales force. You might use telemarketing. You might use partners who help you market the software. SaaS ISVs often mistakenly think that they don't need to market. They have this theory that if you put your software up on the web, the customers will just come. And oh, by the way, they don't usually do that. So if you're going to be a successful SaaS software vendor, you need to do marketing too. Now, you can do another kind of marketing besides the traditional marketing. You can do internet marketing through ads, email, and blogs. And that can often be very successful if you do it properly. But you can also use traditional marketing depending on the kind of application you have. So if you're selling an enterprise or mid-market application, you might use a traditional sales force. You might use partners. You might use telemarketing. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll get some viral marketing. That is, maybe you will get the effect that you're looking for, where people will see your application, they will tell other people about it, and you'll get the pickup without spending your marketing dollars. But you shouldn't count on it because it only happens for a tiny percentage of all the people who are actually going to try to sell software that's based on the web. Can we have the next slide, please? So again, in addition to counting on development and operational costs, you have to count on marketing costs. Now, all of that means that you need to think of a different business model, because although SaaS ISVs can be profitable, they need to take all these differences into account when they build this business model. So you need to take all of these costs that we've just thought about, including the fact that the length of the marketing cycle may not be a lot shorter than it was for traditional software. It really depends on the kind of software that you're selling. Now, because SaaS software can often be implemented much more quickly than traditional software, sometimes amazingly more quickly, it can help you shorten the marketing cycle. But it may take you a little time to get that established. It may take you a little time to get people accustomed to the fact that they should take that into account when they're making a decision. Also, remember that there are competitors that are already in both the traditional and the SaaS markets selling the same kinds of software that you're going to try to sell in the SaaS market. And their prices and their positioning to customers has to come into account when you think about how you're going to price your software, what you're going to say to customers, and whether or not you're going to be able to pick a price point that's going to both be appealing to the customers and profitable to you. I always say to my clients, be sure you don't pick too low a price point. I've seen quite a few SaaS vendors who realize that they can sell their software for amazingly less than a traditional software vendor because it's so much cheaper for them to make it available, and so they sell it for a tenth of the traditional software vendor's price. Well, they didn't need to do that. They could have sold it for a half and made much more money, left much more money to support marketing and operational costs, given themselves a handsome profit, and still made the customers very happy. So you need to be careful to understand what are people willing to pay for the product, as well as how much can I sell this for when you think about this. Next slide. It's a lot to think about. When you're thinking about a business model, here are some articles that you can read that will help you understand some of the issues. Our friends at Aspire came up with these articles. I've read them over. There's lots of good information here. I don't know if I would agree with every single thing in every article, but they're definitely worth reading, and I commend them to you. There's also a guy who does pricing, who includes SaaS pricing in his thoughts. His name is Jim Geisman. You might want to look him up on the web, too, and read some of the things he's writing about. We could go to the next slide now, which I think is the last slide. We will get there. Yes, that's it. So remember, you can be profitable at this, but the trick isn't just building a great product. You do have to build a great product, but you've got to build a product that's for an identified customer need. If you build a product that doesn't have a customer, there's no one there to buy it. And trying to convince people that they want it is a very expensive, very lengthy kind of job that you probably don't want to take on. You need to price the product to the market That means figuring out both whether there's already an established price point for that kind of a product, whether you can make money at that price point, and how much the customers are willing to pay for the product. You need to back up the product with superlative service. When you're a SaaS vendor, you are going to be working with the customer forever, hopefully. The only way you get them to renew that subscription is by giving them such good service that they never want to say goodbye. So good service is part of the game. And don't leave any money on the table. Make sure that you charge for the value of what you're giving, and not just based on a markup over cost. So much luck to you. This is a really great game. It's really only just getting started, and there's lots of time in the future in which all of us are going to make money. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Amy. Before we move forward to the next part of the webinar sessions, we'd like to conduct a poll. So I'm going to be launching a poll, and it will be open for a minute or so. We would request the participants to provide their votes. It's a multiple choice answer, so you can select more than one choice as well. Okay, so we just finished our poll, and I am sharing the results here for your view. So this is a very interesting statistics that we have seen here, which is the highest percentage of problem area is considered to be the pricing model, and more interestingly, the other three is also equally important. And that is something that we are witnessing here as well. So with this, we will move on to the next part of our session. So we have Alex Ginger. He is the product development at Active Operations Management International. He is responsible for the complete product management of AOMI product Workware, right from defining the product roadmap to ensuring the development and marketable version of the product is released. Prior to his establishment with AOMI, Alex has worked in management consulting with EDS, Impact Plus, and Lanner Group, focusing on process and performance improvement projects in the financial services sector. And it's going to be interesting for us because Alex is going to be sharing his own experience in building a SaaS product and offering it in even multiple versions as a hybrid model as well. So he'll be here to share with us some interesting facts around their product and their experience. Alex, you can take it from here. I'm going to move the slides for you.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. And thank you, Amy, also for a very interesting presentation. I think what we'll probably find is that a number of the things I've got to say today will echo the findings of all Amy's research into the SaaS marketplace. But I'm going to be talking from a slightly different perspective, as Jackie mentioned, as a vendor who had some experience in deploying a SaaS marketplace. So let's start by telling you a little bit about Active Operations Management International. AOMI, as we call it for short, we serve the service operations management industry. And by that, I mean back office processing operations, contact centers, anywhere where there is the processing of a high volume of repeatable transactions going on, and a need to do so in an efficient and productive manner. So as you can probably imagine, the types of organizations we work with are banks, insurers, BPOs. One of the advantages for us at SaaS, and why we're so successful with SaaS, is that our offering is fairly generic and can be applied in any industry where they have particular challenge. We're a UK-based organisation, but we have operations in North America and Australia, and emerging operations in India and South Africa. And the little orange flags on the map there show a little bit about some of the locations in which we're deployed. Our software is a web-based application called Workware, which is a forecasting, planning and management information tool used in clerical operations and contact centres, those sorts of environments. The easiest way for you to imagine it is perhaps like in the way that Microsoft Project provides a tool set for project managers, we provide a tool set for operations managers to forecast and plan their workload and to match resource to workload and report on performance. So that's a model to put in your mind. So the scale, we have about 25 to 30,000 customer employees around the world whose time is managed by the Workware application, and that's an important metric for us because when I talk about pricing models later on, that's a metric that we link directly to our SaaS pricing. So we can have the next slide, Jennifer. So a little bit about our experiences as a SaaS vendor. The deployment of Workware as a SaaS solution goes back to 2005 when we chose to redevelop our existing SIP client application to become a web application. Since then, our usage of SaaS has moved on quite a bit, and as of today, roughly speaking, 70% of our customer base is deployed on SaaS, the remainder being a more traditional customer installed situation. We host our SaaS service in a variety of locations around the world to simply provide the appropriate level of service and responsiveness to our customers. That's something we found important. And it's always been our strategy to have a third-party provider do the hosting and infrastructure side of the business. That's not something we've ever undertaken ourselves. We'll talk a little bit later about how I think that's proved to be an important strategy for us in managing profitability. Another factor that I think is quite important for us in terms of the success of Workware as a SaaS product is the fact that it is absolutely a standard product. We don't have multiple versions for different client installations. It's standardized, but it allows extensive configurability across the application. So if we move on to the next slide, Jackie, the reason I think that's so important is, as the next slide comes up, which I think is a very interesting model from some Forrester research, this is showing us the range in maturity it's possible to achieve for a SaaS application. So if we start down at the bottom left, where we're simply talking about devolving the operations of an existing application to someone else, a very, very basic form of SaaS, through to on the far right-hand side, very dynamically configurable and extensible applications that the customer can provision on demand. Now, where do we sit? Well, the Workware product sits somewhere in the middle to the upper reaches, around about level 3, level 4, in that what we do provide is the ability to have multiple customers accessing a single instance of the software in a multi-tenanted environment. But we do allow those customers to have significant configuration within that multi-tenanted environment. We've perhaps got a little bit further to go in terms of getting fully up to level 4, but it's nice to have some room to grow. I'm going to refer back to this model as we go through some of the other slides, because I think it's quite important in understanding how you manage your profitability, is what level on this scale your application sits. Okay, we can have the next slide. Again, please, Jackie. I think it's vital for me to say at this stage, before I specifically talk about profitability, that perhaps the biggest impact on our business of moving to a SaaS model is not profitability per se, but SaaS's ability to enable productivity by enabling sales and enabling rapid delivery. So one of the factors of our business is that we don't particularly see ourselves as a software company. Our solution that we provide provide to customers is a management methodology made up of consulting services, training, and software. So the type of conversation we're having with the customer is about selling performance improvement outcomes. So our typical conversation is not with an IT director, it's with a operations director, and the budget we're competing for is the generic performance improvement budget. So we're up against initiatives like Lean and Six Sigma, whatever the current flavour of the month is. The great thing about SaaS is that once we've convinced that community that we're the right initiative to back, we don't then have another period of convincing to do to get the in-house IT community on side to support our application. There's less governance and there's less drag created by that process. Similarly, of course, there's very little lag time. We're fortunate in that we're able to provision a new client into the application very, very quickly, in a matter of days. And so we can move straight from decision made to project commencement in a very short space of time. We'll talk about the financial model in a little bit more in depth in a moment, but SaaS has also allowed us to make a much more compelling business case to our customers. We'll talk about the utility-based pricing we deploy in a moment, which effectively allows no capital expenditure for the customer, either on licensing or on hardware. They also get a predictable future cost, and because of the way we operate, we also are able to offer that there's no software charge until we've proven the benefits of our methodology in our software. Couple that with the fact that actually we can typically provide service element, hosting and what have you, cheaper than many in-house IT departments can do it. And you put all that together, and it's a pretty impressive package. It's very important to us because one of the major factors of our consulting work is that we can deliver benefits very, very quickly to the client. If those benefits are being offset by significant upfront costs, there's not such an impressive situation. Through SaaS, there's very little upfront costs, and so we're able to deliver very, very quick return on investment, and certainly well within the first 12 months. And that's an impressive thing to be able to offer people. So moving forward to the next slide, please, Janaki. In terms of thinking about profitability, I'm going to talk a little bit about, first of all, about the revenue and sales side, and then move on to costs, managing the cost side of things a little bit later. Coming to profitability, to revenue, clearly the pricing model we use is vital. And I think, echoing what Amy said earlier on, in order to encourage people who are used to traditional models into SaaS, we have to do something different. We have to differentiate and offer some sort of compelling proposition to the customer. I think there's options for organisations there in terms of whether they want SaaS to be a profit centre in itself, or whether, in fact, they simply want it to be an enabler of license sales. Our approach has typically been for SaaS to enable sales and not to be a particularly additional profit centre, but there are choices for each organisation to make there. So what we have done is to develop a utility-based pricing approach for our software. So rather than a traditional upfront license and maintenance, we bill licenses on a monthly basis, and we charge a fee that is proportional to the number of staff who are managed by the software. So it's directly linked to the usage of the company. So as the implementation increases across the different parts of the organisation, or the size of the organisation increases, the number of staff, so does our licensing. But vice versa, as the staffing drops, indeed so does our licensing. Now that license fee covers the license itself, it covers upgrades, it covers support, and we charge against that model for both our SaaS and our traditional installed customers. For the SaaS customers, we also have an additional layer of charging for the hosting service, but again, we link that directly to the usage, directly to the number of managed staff. If I just have the next
Sure. Yeah. So, there is a slight time delay here, so I hope it should show up any time now.
Okay, no problem. We'll keep an eye on it. From a sales and marketing point of view, again, I'd echo what Amy said. I don't think we do anything different in terms of selling our SaaS offering. We're very, very clear that we don't have a product that people are going to buy self-service on the web or any other means. And so the sales approach is very much the same as it would be a traditional sale. We focus on selling the performance improvement outcomes we can deliver, and hopefully SaaS smooths the way and accelerates the process from sales into delivery. Just the final set of bullets on this slide, Jennifer. Something I think that is often overlooked about how SaaS can enable profitability is the fact that once you've got access to all this rich customer data in your environment, subject to what you've agreed with your client, there's an awful lot of value-added services you can build around that. So benchmarking or analysis of data can be extremely valuable either for just competitive advantage purposes or for commercial advantage. When you think about someone like Salesforce.com that often gets quoted as a typical SaaS vendor, think about the rich information they've got to analyze average time to sale or completion rates across different industries, sectors, etc. Lots of very valuable information there. Moving on to the cost side of profitability. So on to the next slide, please, Jennifer. The first area of cost to think about is obviously development. And Amy talked about this. Here is where I'd like to refer back, I think, to that maturity model I showed earlier on. And our experience has been that if you are at the higher levels of maturity against that model, where you've achieved the standard product with configurability level, then actually development can become more simple and more cost effective in not having to support multiple versions, and you're not having to do extremely complicated rollouts across different versions for different clients. So it can be quicker and more cost effective. I think if you're down at the lower end of that maturity, you've got a much more difficult battle because you're effectively having to maintain multiple applications in effect rather than benefiting from the economies of scale. On the support side, well, clearly there's a different relationship between you and your customers between the SaaS and traditional model. We provide more support to our SaaS customers than we do to our traditional customers. We would typically do only sort of third line support for traditional customers, but much more first and second line for a SaaS customer. So it might seem obvious that it's more labour intensive to service a SaaS customer, and that's generally true. But there are some interesting dynamics in play. For instance, we sometimes find it's easier to solve difficult inquiries from a SaaS customer because we've got access to the data and all the variables in terms of the environment, what have you, are under our control. Whereas we don't have that luxury when we're trying to solve a problem for a traditional in-house installation. Infrastructure is perhaps the biggest additional cost, obviously, and there's huge potential there for periodic increases in cost as you need to purchase hardware, licenses, etc., and do refreshes. of investing in new infrastructure, and clearly that's very front-end loaded. So what we've been able to do through use of third-party outsourcers is smooth that cost, give ourselves a more steady, predictable cost against our steady, predictable revenue. That's fantastic, but it still leaves us exposed in the early days when we've had to pay for additional capacity that isn't yet being paid for by the customer. So where we're heading these days is still working with our outsourced providers, but looking to exploit the latest in data center virtualization technology to accurately match the capacity of our infrastructure to the capacity required by the customer, and more accurately match the costs, which could have some really quite important implications for us. Okay, I'm moving on to my final slide, please, Jackie, just to kind of wrap up my thoughts. I think hopefully it's clear that SaaS has been an important factor in our success. For us, perhaps the principal benefit has been in its ability to enable sales and delivery more than a particular driver of productivity. I think it's very important that we think creatively about the business models and the pricing models so that we can deliver something that is truly compelling to the customer, that shocks them out of their traditional ways of thinking about software purchases. When considering managing costs, I would encourage people to think about what elements of the SaaS delivery are your core competencies, what you might want to perhaps outsource. And on the development front, I would absolutely agree that if you can develop with SaaS in mind and get up that maturity model, it will help. But at the end of the day, a well-designed product that meets the customer need is still the most important thing. So I hope that's been useful to understand our perspective and our experiences. And I'll hand back to Janki there for the rest of the show.
Thank you, Alex. It was great to see the insights from your end. And I apologize to everyone for the time delay we had in between the slides. So moving forward to our questions session, as I mentioned earlier, we had received a set of questions prior to our webinar. So I'll be running through those questions with each of our speakers today. So Alex, we have the first question for you. Is there a ratio of capital cost for the software to the SaaS pricing, and should the capital cost include infrastructure cost as well?
Okay, so interesting question. I suppose yes, there is, in the sense that the higher the price of a piece of software in a traditional model, the higher one is likely to need to charge and be able to charge under a SaaS model. But I think to really shock people out of their traditional thinking, we need to sort of break out of the traditional models. And I would encourage people to think about effectively modelling the financial implications of offering SaaS. So work out what it's going to cost to offer the service, determine what you think the uptake of the service might be, and then explore the numbers in terms of what your required price would be to break even for those numbers, and what your required price would be to make an acceptable level of profit, and what you think you can charge in the marketplace. So I would base the pricing more around a multi-faceted model of all the costs than perhaps looking directly at the original capital cost.
Okay, thanks. Amy, this is the question for you. We are transitioning from a desktop to a SaaS solution, exposing our business logic through services. Interested in hybrid pricing. While SaaS model has profitability, there is a comment that ISVs supporting hybrid model are better positioned to meet their profitability. Is this true?
I think it's very hard to do that unless you move to a model where you have rewritten to the SaaS model and you are supporting both the traditional solution and the SaaS solution with a single piece of software. Because I think that if you're doing that with two separate pieces of software, it's really hard to be able to support the development costs and make enough money at it to make that attractive. I don't know of anyone today who's actually doing that. I certainly know of people who are trying to do that, but I don't know of anyone who's succeeded at doing that.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Alex, this is a question for you. Can you describe a sales strategy for a SaaS model product to compete with a licensed product of a lower cost or lower service?
Yeah, I think, I guess, first of all, if the competitive product is of a lower service, then just as in a traditional sense, that's obviously the first thing to play on. It's still a lot about functionality and how that appeals to the customer. But as well as playing on that line, we've also got a couple of other levers to pull in that we can certainly accentuate the benefits of SaaS, the sorts of things both Amy and I talked around speed to implementation, faster and more frequent delivery of new versions and new innovations. And also, of course, we've got a bit more flexibility on the pricing to offer. So again, by offering some more inventive and enticing pricing model, we should be able to create advantage there too.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Amy, this is a question for you. Interested in sales compensation models and sales structure?
Well, this is a really hard question. I think that that the companies that have succeeded the best, who are in both the traditional software business and the SaaS business, do that by having a separate set of salesmen selling SaaS, because the compensation model for the SaaS business is going to be remarkably different than it is for the traditional software business. In the traditional software business, people get paid up front for selling software. In the SaaS business, you need to pay people over time because you're getting paid over time. So the compensation model is going to be so different that it's really hard to have people selling both and having them really pay attention to both products.
Okay. Thanks, Amy. Alex, I think you would be able to answer this question more appropriately, which is how is the sales cycle and implementation cycle time contributing to the profitability in a SaaS model?
Well, hugely, yeah, absolutely. I think, as I touched on in the presentation, it's probably the most important thing that we've achieved through SaaS. It simply eases the process. It's quicker. It's less labour intensive for us and the client to get down the process. I guess put simply, when the client asks when can you start, we can say tomorrow, and that's something that a traditional vendor is never going to be able to compete with.
Okay, sure. Amy, this is for you. Do you have any rough metrics to indicate the increase in customers in a SaaS model in order to meet the profitability that an on-premise model would have produced otherwise?
That's a really hard question to answer. I mean, basically what you're looking at when you look at the SaaS model versus the traditional software model is that you're going to sell in volume rather than selling to a smaller number of customers in the traditional software model. I mean, if you look at the successful SaaS vendors, it's all about selling in volume. In the most stretched out part of the model, it's for selling to customers for free. That's the Google part of the model, and collecting from them by having an advertising supported model. Most of the participants in this seminar probably aren't interested in that part of the model, but basically the idea is that we charge less and we have more customers. And the reason we can charge less is because the operational costs and the efficiencies of the SaaS model allow us to charge less because so much is automated in this model.
Okay. Thanks, Amy. Alex, this is a question for you, which is actually coming out from our poll as well. The question is, do you face data security challenges in terms of convincing your customers to move to the SaaS model?
Yes, yeah, I think we were dealing with customer account data and things like that, I think we would probably get an awful lot more questions than we do. But even with the relatively low level of sensitivity, we are quizzed fairly heavily.
Okay, sure. Amy, this is a question for you. How does SaaS compare with licensing-based models for revenues in starting years, especially since customers can easily switch?
Okay, so I guess the way I would say this is that you can expect to start seeing money more quickly because you theoretically can start seeing money as soon as you turn the switch on and have anyone aware of the fact that you're offering product. You don't have to wait through a long marketing cycle to make that happen. On the other hand, until you build a volume of customers, the amounts of money can be smaller. So there's a kind of a balancing act here. I would be less concerned about the switchability. If you are building an application that's a consumer application or a very small business application, there is some ability to readily switch between competitive applications. But once you're talking about real business applications, even though it takes a lot less time to go to a SaaS application than it does to go to a conventional, traditional application, by the time the customer has invested in implementing the application, even if it takes 3 weeks instead of 3 months, he still has to do the implementation, he has to train his people, and he makes a certain investment in using the application. He's not going to be prepared to just throw it out because he's a little bit peeved or he's seen something newer and shinier. So the switching thing is not quite as easy as you may have heard.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Alex, this is a question for you. Will or have government entities started to adopt secure SaaS offerings over high-cost customized solutions built by the big?
It's an interesting one. I can speak from our perspective only, I guess, on this. But for us, we have recently acquired our first major public sector customer. So the evidence there would suggest that there is some move in this direction by such organisations. I think probably harking back to my answer to the data security question earlier on, I think probably one of the reasons that we've been able to pursue that particular deal is again because of the relatively low sensitivity of the data we hold. I'm not sure that solutions that hold more sensitive data will be that readily moved to SaaS by government bodies, given their extreme caution around those sorts of things. I wonder also whether you could say that arguably SaaS lends itself better to solutions which are generic and can be applied across multiple industries and locations. There's perhaps a case of saying that whilst a lot of government applications will be generic, there's also an awful lot of specific purposed IT in government, which perhaps is very specific to a particular country or a particular area. So maybe that means that not so much of the market is addressable for SaaS in the public sector as it maybe is in the private sector.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. I think the next question is also for you, Alex. What are the key parameters that a customer looks for while evaluating a SaaS vendor?
Well, I think probably first and foremost they're still looking for a product which meets their needs, which has the functionality and the benefits that solves their particular business problem. In terms of the SaaS features, I think they're clearly looking for you to be able to provide a level of service which is at the very least as good as what they can get internally, and that they're not making a compromise there. I think the security aspect, again, that they can trust security as strong as they would trust in their own organisation. And that's the tiebreaker being value for money. And not just value for money on day one in terms of the use of the software that they get to work with, because they're paying you a continuing stream of revenue. What's the continuing value that you're going to give them over that time, over the course of a long-term relationship?
Thank you, Alex. Amy, we still have, I think, time for a question or maybe two questions or so. Amy, this is for you. How will true cloud offerings influence SaaS uptake?
Well, the hubbub over the cloud has really brought a lot of attention to SaaS. Think about SaaS as what floats on top of clouds. So clouds are in some sense infrastructure. They offer you compute cycles and storage and maybe some management. And SaaS are the applications that float on top of that infrastructure and storage. So some people go off and want to buy the compute part of the cloud, but a lot of people just want to buy the application, and in that case, they probably don't pay a lot of attention to the rest of what's in the cloud. They just assume that they're doing business with a vendor, and if they like the vendor, that the vendor is responsible for the platform part, the cloud part. I think that you could safely say that the success of the cloud means that SaaS is going to be a lot more successful.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. So I think we have almost reached the end of our session. Once again, thank you everyone for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. I hope you found this to be useful. We still have quite a few questions that have come from the audience. As mentioned earlier, we will be taking them offline and we will be replying back through email. And we request you to provide your feedback at the end of the session. Thank you, everyone.